welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something really significant. Professional burnout. It's a term we hear all the time, and frankly, it's something many people are grappling with. That constant exhaustion, maybe some cynicism creeping in, feeling like what you do doesn't quite land anymore.
Yeah, if that sounds familiar, our sources today offer, I think, a really necessary perspective shift. Because, for years, the conversation has mostly been about, well, fix yourself, be more resilient, meditate more, eat better.
Right, build stronger boundaries, all things that put the onus on the individual.
Exactly. But what if that's, missing the bigger picture? What if the strategies are just band-aids on a much deeper issue? Our sources are suggesting something pretty radical.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not the one feeling.
That's the core idea we want you to take away today. We're trying to move past this, frankly, exhausting narrative that if you're struggling, you just don't have enough grit or something.
We're looking at solid evidence, both academic and professional. That points to a different conclusion. The sister itself might be failing you. Understanding that it's structural, not personal. Well, that's the first step toward clarity, maybe even toward finding real solutions.
Okay, let's unpack that right away. Just how big of a deal are we talking about here? What's the scale of this?
Well, the numbers are pretty staggering, actually.
Really?
The research we looked at suggests that around 53% of all professionals are currently experiencing burnout.
53%. Wow.
Yeah, that's not a small group on the fringes. That's more than half.
So when you hit a number like that, over half the workforce, it stops being about individual problems, doesn't it? It fundamentally changes the conversation.
It has to. It becomes a crisis in how work itself is structured. I mean, if a system is supposedly designed for productivity, but it's burning out the majority of the people in it, well, something in that system is broken. Demonstrably so.
Right. The model itself isn't working if that's the outcome for most people.
Exactly. The very structures we count on, how work flows, what's expected, how people are recognized, they seem to be producing this failure state for the majority.
And this connects back to what people actually feel, right? The sources mention those endless seeming 12-hour days, maybe feeling like you're just spinning your wheels.
Absolutely. That feeling of putting in massive hours, but not seeing the results, or just feeling performative. And maybe even worse is that inability to switch off. It's 3 a.m. and your brain is still churning through emails or work problems.
Yeah.
That's the psychological cost.
Yeah.
It's what happens when the institutional stress becomes chronic.
Okay, so before we dive deeper into why the system might be failing, let's clarify what we mean by burnout, because people use that word casually, right? Like, oh, I'm so burned out after that long week. But the sources, they're using a more specific definition.
Yes, that's crucial. We're not just talking about feeling tired or stressed. The foundation here really comes from the work of Dr. Christina Maslach, who's a key figure in this field. She defined burnout as a syndrome with 3 specific parts. It's a triad.
Okay, what are the 3 parts?
So the first one is exhaustion. This is the most obvious part. That deep feeling of being totally drained, physically and emotionally, like no amount of sleep actually fixes it.
Right, that bone deep tired.
Exactly. Then the second dimension is cynicism, or sometimes it's called depersonalization. This is a shift in attitude. You start feeling negative, detached, maybe even callous about your job, your colleagues, the people you serve.
Sort of putting up a wall.
Yeah, it's like a defense mechanism. You start treating work and people almost like objects because engaging feels too costly.
Okay, so exhaustion, cynicism. What's the third?
The third is reduced professional efficacy. This is that nagging feeling of incompetence, like you're not actually achieving anything worthwhile, even if objectively you are. You start doubting your own skills and contributions.
Wow, so it's that combination, exhaustion, cynicism, and feeling ineffective. That's much more specific than just being tired.
Precisely. And when you understand that definition, it really shifts the focus. If over half of professionals are experiencing that specific triad, you have to stop asking, what's wrong with all these people?
And start asking.
What elements in the workplace environment are creating these conditions? What's driving the exhaustion, the cynicism, the feeling of inefficacy?
Which brings us right back to the core argument from the sources supported by Maslach's later work too, right? That burnout isn't really an internal problem of the individual.
Exactly. It's framed as an external social problem. It arises from a fundamental mismatch between the person and their job environment. That's the key concept. Mismatch.
Okay.
The sources identified 6 specific areas where this mismatch commonly happens. These are the areas where the system tends to fail the professional.
Okay, this is where we get practical. If you're listening and struggling, hearing about these specific mismatches might really resonate. So what are these 6 areas? Let's break them down.
Right. They are workload, control, reward, community, fairness, and values. You can kind of think of them as the pillars of a healthy work environment. When things go wrong in several of these areas, burnout becomes almost inevitable.
Okay, let's start with maybe the most obvious ones people feel. Workload and its partner, you mentioned, control. How do these represent a systemic failure?
Well, an unmanageable workload is pretty straightforward, right? Just too much to do. But the sources really emphasize it's not just the amount of work, it's often the lack of control over it.
Okay. So it's not just having 10 tasks.
Right. It's having 10 tasks, but maybe you're being micromanaged on every single one. Or you have absolutely no say in the deadlines. Or the team is clearly understaffed, but the expectations remain sky high. The system fails when it sets impossible demands, but doesn't give people the autonomy or the resources to actually manage the work effectively.
That makes total sense. You feel powerless.
Precisely. You're constantly playing catch-up, maybe sacrificing your own time and well-being just to keep things afloat, because the system itself isn't providing the necessary support or flexibility. That directly fuels the exhaustion component.
Okay, let's move to another pair you mentioned. Reward and fairness. Lots of people feel undervalued, even when they're hitting targets that seemed impossible.
Yeah, and reward here isn't just about the paycheck, though that's part of it, obviously. The sources point out that a mismatch in reward often means a lack of recognition, maybe praise, or just acknowledgement for the effort put in.
Feeling invisible.
Feeling invisible, exactly. But this ties very closely to the fairness pillar. A system fails on fairness when decisions seem arbitrary or opaque. Think about promotions or who gets the interesting projects or how resources are allocated. If that feels biased or like there's favoritism,
Then why bother trying so hard?
exactly. That directly fuels the cynicism part of burnout. If you perceive the system as fundamentally unfair, why would you maintain your engagement or effort? You start to withdraw. It feels rigged.
It's interesting that fairness is highlighted so much. It really speaks to trust in the institution, doesn't it? If you don't trust the system to be fair, that feeling of reduced efficacy seems almost inevitable. You feel like your efforts don't matter in a rigged game.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, what about the last 2? These feel a bit more internal, maybe? Values and community, how do these fit into systemic failure?
They're incredibly important. Let's take values. A mismatch here happens when your personal values clash with what the organization expects you to do or how it behaves.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Maybe your company talks a big game about being customer first, but then pressures you to cut corners in ways you know aren't good for the customer just to meet a metric. Or maybe the company's ethics feel questionable in some area.
That internal conflict.
Yes. That dissonance, feeling like you have to compromise your own principles just to do your job or keep the peace, that's a powerful driver of burnout, especially cynicism and exhaustion. The system is essentially forcing you into a position that feels wrong.
Okay. And the final one, community. Work can feel isolating sometimes, especially now, or the opposite, stuck in a really difficult team dynamic.
Right. The sources talk about community mismatch as a breakdown in social support, connection, and positive relationships at work. It could be feeling isolated, like you mentioned, maybe in remote settings without good connection points.
Aww.
Or, often worse, it could be about persistent conflict, maybe bullying, or just a really toxic team culture where communication is terrible and nobody addresses the problems.
Yeah, that sounds draining.
It is. A system that allows that kind of toxicity to continue, whether through neglect or just poor management, is failing its people. Because those positive relationships, that sense of belonging, that's usually our buffer against stress. If the system erodes that buffer, you're left exposed.
Wow. Okay, looking at it through these 6 mismatches, workload, control, reward, fairness, values, community, and connecting that back to the 53% statistic, it paints a really clear picture.
It does.
It makes the argument that this is environmental, that the failure is built into the structure, incredibly compelling. It's almost impossible to argue it's just about individual weakness when you see these patterns.
And that's the crucial takeaway for you, the listener. It's permission, in a way.
Yeah.
Permission to stop blaming yourself entirely if you're feeling exhausted, cynical, ineffective. It's very likely a rational response to working within a system that's failing on one or probably multiple of these dimensions.
Right, it validates the struggle.
It validates the struggle and hopefully shifts the focus. Instead of just thinking, how can I cope better? Maybe we start thinking, how can this environment be changed?
Okay, let's quickly recap the big points from this deep dive. First, burnout is huge. 53% of professionals affected. That makes it a systemic issue, not an individual one.
Right, a crisis, really.
Second, we have strong academic backing, particularly from Dr. Maslach. Defining burnout clearly and confirming it stems from those systemic mismatches in the workplace.
Those 6 key areas: workload, control, reward, community, fairness, and values. Understanding those gives you the language to see where the system might be breaking down for you.
It equips you to diagnose the situation more accurately, rather than just feeling vaguely overwhelmed or blaming yourself.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the structural roots of the problem.
So, as we wrap up, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on everything we've discussed. Given these 6 areas of mismatch are the levers of systemic failure. If you could pull just one lever to start fixing things, which one do you think would have the most immediate impact for the largest number of people?
Would improving control over work be the most powerful first step? Or maybe fixing the reward and recognition systems? Or perhaps rebuilding a sense of community and fairness?
Which single structural change holds the most promise for beginning the recovery? That's something to think about as you continue exploring this topic.